everybody, and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. I'm your co-host Rose, and this is your host Justin.
Hello.
That has legit. My intro has not changed. Only the energy level has changed.
Indeed. Welcome, everybody, to this episode. It's going to be a good one, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's the first thing we're going to be doing? We're talking about exactly.
Well, first things first. How are we doing with the Wheel of Challenge, the monthly challenge of going to bed on time? Huh?
Oh, God. I've been going to bed on time. Uh, and it's horrible. I'm in pain, and when I wake up, it just hurts so much. And then I feel like I have to go running, which, is awful and is just terrible. Because if I don't, then I will literally be jittery, as if I drank like 20 cups of coffee. And my leg will just keep shaking just like that for like a couple hours. It's pretty ridiculous.
Wonderful.
What about you? How is the Wheel of Challenging affecting you?
I mean, I'm constantly tired all day, every day, so that's nothing new. The thing that I miss is being able to chat with my night owl friends because they keep getting on later and later. So sometimes I just don't see them at all.
That's just terrible. I'm sorry.
If anything, I want this challenge to be over just so I can continue hanging out with them again.
I mean, I kind of feel that I kind of want the challenge to end, but like there are other reasons I don't want it to end too.
Fair. But that's the check-in, and it sounds like it's going bad for both of us. Like we're doing it, but we're not happy about it.
Yeah, it's a Wheel of Challenge. I mean, if it wasn't a challenge, it wouldn't be the Wheel of Challenge, right?
Yeah.
I
Anyway.
put together psychological research on this. I'm doing a little experiment all on my own. It's just my experiment.
But yeah, so what other things do we have for our audience today?
Well, we got Twitter and TikTok. There's the question of the day. Hopefully, you guys will have a chance to check that out and be able to participate. We'd love to hear some of your responses. And, I think some of the questions are pretty fun. What do you think?
Like them. I especially like some of the videos, like the bunny video we got.
Yeah, the bunny video was cute. They're super cute.
Adorables.
And we also got on Sundays where we're doing Twitch live streams. So from 7 to 9 p.m. on Sundays, we're going to be streaming games. Last week was the Jackbox Party game, which was pretty fun. This coming Sunday, we haven't really determined which game it is yet, but it might be Destiny. So if you guys want to watch us play Destiny, there's that. You can definitely play that if you guys care. And if you guys don't care, and there's a different game you want to see us play, shoot us a suggestion. Maybe we'll take it.
Yep.
And then also, there's two other things that I kind of want to talk before we get into the subject at hand. The first thing is that on that list is I want to kind of have this episode where if our audience wants to participate by sending in a particularly detailed story, we won't share your personal information. We'll change names and places and things like that. But
Anonymity.
yes, but we want to kind of discuss maybe a way that we could have helped you through a particularly challenging story. So you could kind of, send it to us, and then we'll kind of outline the things that we think we could be talk about, and then we'll send you an email back saying, hey, we want to use this. This is what we want to talk about, and then if you're cool with it, let us know, and then we'll make an episode on it. So hopefully you guys send some interesting stories. I'll be looking forward to getting to know you guys better. And then lastly, in about 2 weeks, we're going to be doing another Q&A episode. So that means, hey, send us questions, and we'll go ahead and respond to them on camera. So send in the silly questions, the serious questions, the fun questions. Send them all in, and make sure that they're legible. Because Rose has seen a few of these questions that got sent in, and well, she wasn't happy.
If I can't understand it, I can't answer it, okay?
Here's a way of kind of just, positively reinforcing this. If you send us a question that is extremely illegible, I'm gonna put it up, and the whole world is gonna see it. So make sure it's right. Make sure it's right.
Oh goodness.
Okay, and with all that out of the way, what are we getting into today?
Yes, we are getting into aromatherapy.
Excellent. So, on this episode of Wicked Parley, we're going to be discussing aromatherapy. And we're going to be breaking into first a little bit of the history and the backstory behind aromatherapy, a little bit. We're going to be dabbling a little bit into the science, potentially, regarding it. We're going to be looking at perhaps some of the medical uses. We're going to be looking at the natural versus man-made when it comes to elements of aroma. So like, there's some things that are, cultivated, and some that are just picked in the wild. So we'll be kind of discussing that. And then final conclusions and thoughts regarding the overall topic. And as always, we will be giving 2 minutes at the end of each of the sections to answer any of your comments or questions that you post in the chat. So with that, we look forward to talking to you, and hopefully this episode will be entertaining to all of you guys.
I'll be reading all the comments in the chat, even if I cannot reply.
Yes. And
All
she
right.
will let me know, secretly.
All right, so with that, let's get a move on, shall we? First off, the history of aromatherapy. Dun da da da! So, what is aromatherapy and how did it start?
Well, aromatherapy, depending upon who you ask, it has to do with the notion of scents, particularly, scents that please you and make you happy, and have to do some sort of psychological or some sort of medical effect that is supposed to take part. So an idea is that perhaps if you're in the presence of, say, lavender, you might be more calm. It's also been known that some people try to use it as an antiseptic. So, there are some things that have been tried over the years. And so just a simple scent supposedly is supposed to affect your, biology in some way. Yeah, are we going to talk about how far back it starts? Is that something else you wanted to talk about?
How far back what's the earliest record we have of it?
Well, honestly, it seems like aromas or incense have been found in all parts of the world for a very long time. You could almost look at any human settlement, and there's some evidence of some sort of incense or aroma being used for only everything under the sun when it comes to applications. There simply is no definitive answer of where it started and what it exactly was used for. It's been speculated that it's been used for spiritual purposes. It's been speculated it was used for medicinal purposes. And there's even some speculation that it had to do with something entirely unknown to us currently that was probably relating to some sort of, custom. So it's unclear exactly how every culture has used it, but it seems to be used a lot. The earliest records of it that you can really go back to are really every single settlement. But major cultures, would be like Mesopotamian cultures, Egypt, the Greeks, the Chinese, a lot of the Indian subcontinent.
Mm-hmm.
All the cultures and all the peoples in all those regions have long since been documented using all sorts of aromas and incense for a whole variety of things, from spiritual to medical.
Okay.
Of course, as it's also known, there is sort of a pseudoscience value here. So without me going too crazy into the details of the history of it, understand that this is still in the realm of a pseudoscience. So.
Okay. So it's been around for a darn long time then. Granted, scents have always been around, so it's not too surprising.
Yeah.
Alright. So, if aromatherapy, relatively recent thing, all things considered, aromas and incense have been around for so long, do we have any records on what kind of made it a thing to begin with officially, or is it just up in the air since kind of everybody used it?
Honestly, no, not really. As I kind of said before, it's kind of been found in almost every single settlement in some way or form. There's a ritualization that seems to be associated with a lot of the incense. So it could be surround funeral practices, could be spiritual of some kind, could be something to do with medical, help, some kind, like a medicine woman or medicine doctor of some kind. But it's not really clear. But what you could say is that there is this thing called essential oils, which are clearly linked to aromatherapy and are often used in modern aromatherapy practices. And they have their roots with, I'm sure most people know this, Aristotle. Aristotle, being the Greek philosopher, Greek everybody, the Greek everyman. I have an opinion about the world. and everything had this notion of the basic elements, earth, wind, fire, water, etc. And his notion that if you hyper focused on one of these things and distilled it to a certain point, you would basically get the purest version of an element. And that particular notion led to the development of essential oils as we understand them today. Now, essential oils have definitely existed before the time of Aristotle, but for their consistent use, it was pretty much Aristotle and the notion of what he said that kind of kick-started and kind of put it into the forelight of the rest of the world, so that way they all kind of stood up and took notice. So if you weren't using it then, you probably were after he said it.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen essential oils used for like scented candle making and whatnot. That's about all I use it for because they smell nice.
Yeah, they do smell nice. I mean, I have tons of candles.
So many. They're all so nice.
Yeah, they are nice.
So there's obviously a ton of different scents and aromas and whatnot purely by looking at the amount of different oils, incense, candles that you can find in store, or even through small-time business owners who specialize in those. So, are there any popular scents amongst the different countries? Or any universal ones, distinct ones, da-da-da-da-da?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think one of the first things to kind of state when it comes to this is that the rest of the world kind of has access to everywhere. So if one country maybe prefers one thing to another, then all countries are going to have access to it. You can order anything just about on the internet nowadays, so...
It just it just might take a little longer for some people to get it than others.
Yes, but I definitely think there is something to say. I mean, in Asia, fermented items are very popular. Fermented fish and fermented flowers have been known to be used in incense that are popular throughout Asia. So that's something that's pretty common, pretty well understood, and something that typically, would be a little bit odd, say in some parts of the West. In the United States, wildflowers are heavily used. It was not uncommon for Native Americans in North America to use tobacco or sage in some of their spiritual, religious practices, as well as medicinal effects, touted by certain leaders in the tribes. Peppermint and mint are also heavily used, but those aren't the only things that are typically used in the States. But it's just a very small thing, because if I wanted to say about everything used in the States, I'd be here for a very long time. So
and we don't have that time.
No, I mean, just to get an idea, I mean, like lemon oils, almonds, a word I can't even pronounce, it's like jojoba oil or something like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah. And when it comes to Europe, they are heavily into wildflowers as well. Lavender kind of played a huge role when it came to the ideas surrounding aromatherapy, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the one thing that does seem to be universal, because you did ask about the universal part.
Or as close to it as possible, yeah.
Is some version of sage. Sage seems to kind of... or some kind of version of it, seems to be found in a lot of places around the world. It's not just in one spot, so that might have something to do. It might be an earlier thing that was used by humans at some point, and it just kind of got brought with us as we kind of spread across the globe.
Okay, that's a lot more than I thought. That does answer the whole if there was a universal scent or not, since it's kind of difficult to find something that's actually universal, since the cultures are all different and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the exceptions and all that. So it's kind of hard to find something that's actually universal, or as close to it as possible. So aromatherapy is a relatively new term in the grand scheme of things. It was known by aromas and incense in the past and whatnot. So when did it start kind of transitioning to be aromatherapy?
Well, that one's a little bit difficult.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So when it comes to aromatherapy, there are these two French figures that pop up roughly around the same time period. One's named Renee, and that person wrote a book about 1937 looking at lavender and saying it had some uses as a sort of aroma that could be used medically. And then there was another guy named Jean, who was a French trauma surgeon during World War II, who used lavender as antiseptic. That is pretty much the starting point for the aromatherapy part of it. Before that, it kind of just was something that was touted. Various aromas and scents and things like that were. I wouldn't call it pickled, but were collected and put into jars, and then some were made into candles, some were made into various other things, such as incense and things like that, and they were touted as having certain sorts of effects, and you could say certain drugs were discovered that way. But it took a long time for science to kind of catch up to the whole notions behind some of the medical applications of aromatherapy, if you believe the claims, because there are definitely lots of them. And so it wasn't really until the 50s until you started seeing actual scientists starting to take a look at some of the stuff. And I think you probably could tout that back to those two French individuals that I mentioned before. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of research, especially from them, that had to do with lavender and having a very positive effect on the immune system. And also having a soothing, calming effect during certain traumatic events. Because, imagine if you're on a battlefield, things are exploding everywhere around you. I think, having a soothing scent might not be the thing you want to focus on in that particular moment. Especially if you're having a bullet, pulled out of you or something like that with no antiseptics. So, that might be, just a bit bad. So, yeah.
Just a tad. Just a tad. Well, okay. So, the history of aromatherapy goes, well, at least the origins of aromatherapy go back all the way back to the beginning.
Pretty much.
Awesome. Alright, let me go ahead and see if we have any comments here. I have a hello.
Hello, host.
Hello, host.
Welcome back.
Happy to have you back. Other than that, nothing so far about nothing so far about the history.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think I had too much to drink earlier. Too much water.
Oh my. Yeah, the Mountain Dew Baja Blast didn't help either.
No. Yummy, but no.
Yeah.
Alright, so if we don't have anything at the moment, I guess we can just shuckle on right now to the science!
The science of aromas. How pleasant they're going to be. The science.
The science!
Science!
I have no idea if anybody understood the reference I was attempting to make. I'm very bad, so. Alright, moving on from history. That was one of my worst subjects in school.
Well, I love history, but definitely not my greatest subject either.
So, if we're going to talk about medical uses later tonight, how does aromatherapy work to begin with?
Okay, I'm going to go through a series of kind of examples, and I'm going to hope that everyone can follow along. Although we have some pictures on a slideshow situation, which I hope do facilitate things, I don't want to get too much into this, so when it comes to the biology part, just because there's so much here, and it would take a very long time to explain everything, and also I don't feel that I am adequately well versed enough to go into all the nitty-gritty regarding this particular function. So just bear with me as I kind of go through this. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the example of a flower.
Okay.
So let's say, for instance, I have this little cute guy right here.
Adorable origami.
Little wonderful little flower, and I smell the flower. Well, you're thinking, okay, well, you're smelling the flower, but what's going on? Well, there are small little particulates, matter, that is around that particular flower that you are ingesting through your nose. Those particles are then sent through your nasal cavity into the area that is responsible for taking in a bunch of detecting those particular particles. Those particular particles are then registered by the olfactory bulb, which then tells the brain that, hey, you're smelling something, and now you're going to secrete a hormone that is linked to the particular part of the brain that then associates with a specific memory. Once this particular process happens, you often may have an instant reaction, some sort of thing, because as I'm sure everyone knows, if you smell something, you likely are going to think about something that relates to the smell. So,
Mm-hmm.
let's say
Cookies.
you walk into a house and you start smelling, maybe some cookies and things. Maybe it will take you back to a time where you visited a grandmother or a grandfather and they were making you just the most delicious cookies in the world. Slip in the Matrix thing right there. Or another example, I remember a professor of mine once said that whenever he smelled blueberries, he had the sudden urge to vomit because he had a particularly traumatic event where he had a blueberry muffin and then had to vomit.
Oh.
Yeah, so there is a lot of reasons for the reason why this particular thing happens, but it probably has to do with the fact that the olfactory system is one of the earliest systems that ever developed in the body. It also is very close to a lot of portions of the brain that have to do with memory. So it doesn't surprise me that these correlations seem to happen. With that, I'm more or less kind of done talking about this, unless there's more things you'd like to ask me about.
Give me just a moment to process all that. Hold on. Hold on. With biology, I haven't touched biology in a while because I tested out of that for like post-secondary.
Yeah, just go ahead and just name drop those skills right there. Just.
But yeah,
just
we shouldn't have mentioned the thing. So, biology needs some work. All right, so that does answer my original question of how it works and how it actually interacts with the physical body of an individual. Okay. A lot more involved than I thought, but I kind of figured. I'm not a biologist. Different type of science. So we don't want to go into too much detail here, otherwise, gonna be spouting potentially wrong information, and we don't want to do that. That's the opposite of what we want to do with the show. All right. So besides the associations with memories and certain body reactions, and also a type of survival trick for in the past, how does aromatherapy affect the patient emotionally?
Well, as you kind of alluded to, as we kind of mentioned to you actually previously, in this situation, the olfactory system itself probably is a survival guide to allowing yourself to detect certain dangerous situations. And as such, you're also likely to create an emotional tie to those particular events. So, like hypothetically, let's say you see a tiger, you're going to, maybe you smell tiger urine or something like that, you're able to discern what that is, and you understand that tiger can kill you. You're going to then have an emotional response, which is likely going to be fear. And then that emotional response is going to trigger a memory, in which case you are then going to have an immediate response to those particular stimuli. At which point you are likely going to do whatever makes the most common sense, which is usually, I would imagine, flee. Or at least hopefully flee.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
sometimes you instead freeze, and that's not a good one.
Yeah. Also, there's something to consider too when it comes to this type of interaction, and that is the fact that hormones are released. Those hormones, which I probably should have mentioned a little bit before we move to this section, but I'll get there before I say the last particular thing. Has a huge impact on the way in which your whole body functions. Sometimes with the release of certain hormones release allergenic effects. I'm sure some people who have summertime allergies probably hate the fact that certain trees pollinate towards the end of summer. It makes life kind of hellish. I know I do, because I have that problem.
Ew.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I can smell something, and then I can associate with a very negative reaction or emotional state. Another is certain positive emotions. Like for me, like there's a plant that you can go and you can smell, and it smells just like licorice. And I actually kind of like licorice. It's kind of good.
Okay. So, one moment. So, just to clarify, for positive emotions, it doesn't need to be, quote, a nice smell. It just needs to match, or is like...
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a nice smell to everyone, just nice to you. Everyone's going to be different when it comes to talking about certain smells. What smells good to you may not smell good to me, and vice versa. But it needs to be pleasant, typically, to have a positive reaction. It is pretty easy to understand that if you have a certain smell, and that smell is, disgusting in some way or shape or form, you're likely going to have a negative response to this. The reason why you're going to have this negative response is because it is a survival instinct. If you're going into the wild and you need to, say, forage for plants, it's a good idea to be able to smell the various food to know when it's ripe or when it's safe to eat. And that's probably also why the memory takes place when it comes to those particular things, is because it's also linked to survival in that way. However, I can give you an example. When I was in San Francisco, I was at the San Francisco Zoo. And the San Francisco Zoo is a wonderful zoo, and it also has a particularly wonderful botany area. It's a big giant greenhouse with a whole bunch of, exciting and exotic flora. And while I was there was a particular famous type of exotic flora that's supposed to be the most beautiful flower in the world. Unfortunately, it smells like rotten eggs. It is horrific. It is a huge, disgusting, smelly place. And so whenever I think of the botany area, I always think of that particular plant, and I never want to go in it. And so it has now created an incredibly negative response because of this particular thing. To me. Some people may find it beautiful, might find it pleasant. I think it smells like ass, and so no. However, I also think that lavender is quite pleasant and soothing, and so to me it is a very positive reaction to an otherwise complicated sense. So I hope that kind of helped clear things up a little bit when it comes to nicer, because like everyone is going to be a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of figured it. So it's like, was it just like positive as always, just like something quote nice? But it makes sense that it's just it just differs based on the individual. Let me quickly check on the comment section here. All right. Ba-ba-da-ba. Nothing right now. But I do know something similar to the flower you're talking about. At least I think so. The first one, at least. The one that, like, it looks pretty, but it smells horrendous.
Yes.
I'm probably going to pronounce the first word wrong. The carrion flower, also known as the gorge flower, or stinking flowers.
Yes, that sounds shockingly similar, if not the same thing.
Yeah, it's a really pretty thing. However, it's supposed to smell like rotting flesh.
If it's the same thing, then I'm going to say yes. And rotten flesh smells like bad eggs.
It's like, yay, it looks pretty. It's going to smell. Nope.
Oh, good God. If you get close to it, you're just going to be like, you're going to question all elements of your life. And you're just going to be like,
don't judge a book by its cover.
Why am I making these bad decisions? Why is this happening to me? Why have I decided this? This is terrible. No.
Yeah. Straight up, just never judge a book by its cover. It's just nah. Alright. At the moment, no comments, so let's go ahead and move on, shall we?
Okay.
So, you helped me answer my question about how it physically affects the body. You've talked about how it affects someone emotionally. Let's go into the therapy bit of it. How does it affect a person mentally, besides for, bringing up the memories and whatnot?
Well, I mean, medical uses, there are a lot of outrageous claims out there. You can cite con men from during the 18 blah blahs to the 19 blah blahs, and they're out there, trying to sell and do everything, and so it's like...
So many blah blahs.
Yeah, you have no idea. Oh my God. But there's a lot of scientific misconceptions that might be able to be cleared up when it comes to this. So the first thing is that science doesn't typically endorse aromatherapy as actually helpful. According to the vast majority of research that had been conducted from around the 1950s to about just before the modern day, the vast majority of people basically said it doesn't beat the placebo effect. So on its best day, it is as good as a placebo, which effectively means it doesn't do anything at all. And so it was chalked up to being a pseudoscience, and yeah. And then about 10, 12 years ago, there was this huge kind of revitalization of the ideas around it. Primarily because there was some research that had been conducted that was looking at studies with people who were suffering from cancer. And they had certain aromas around them, and they seemed to be having a slightly positive effect on them, which was affecting their overall diagnosis. And a few people actually were able to recover. And those people touted their success on those aromas being present. Science.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. Some scientists came back and were like, "Hey, let's recreate the results and see what we get." Well, when the results were recreated, the results were inconclusive, and they once again shocked at the placebo effect. But it got people starting to talk, and it started to be thought of as that perhaps certain smells elicit certain hormonal responses. Those hormonal responses then trigger certain developments of white blood cells that then attack potential, things in your body that are bad, such as cancer. And so, the idea in more recent years, like we're talking like this year, has actually, there have been some evidence that has looked at that particular thing, and it isn't 100% saying no, particularly to lavender, to I believe oregano was used, and a few other small things that were simple scents. And so perhaps there is this correlation that we don't quite fully understand yet that actually has a positive effect on people. Maybe it's not the plants themselves, maybe it's the hormone, and then it's the combination of the memory and the hormone triggering some sort of response, and then the body's just using that response to fight on its own behalf to try and survive. It's not really well understood just yet, but current research is being conducted, and if new information comes out, I will be happy to talk about it.
Ooh, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
To think it could help with like the bigger problems like that. Goodness.
Yeah, I mean, just because there's also a few other things I should probably mention too.
Yeah.
So first things first, though, just because yes, there's a whole bunch of good things that I just said, there is a very, very large amount of negatives. I am painting a rosy picture, and I'm about to shatter it.
Building it up to bring it back down.
So, a lot of people may ask the question about, what possible effects could this have? Well, a lot of people are quick to point the positives. Elevating your mood, making you feel happy, maybe reducing anxiety, reducing stress, reducing depression, reducing cancer, hypothetically, perhaps making you feel better. Maybe you have a more healthy lifestyle by having the presence of these various scents in your life. And maybe even seeing an aromatherapist and having some sort of diagnosis. All are potential good things. However, if you're a person who thinks aromas have an effect on your skin, yikes, look out. There's going to be some pretty bad problems that are going to happen. There's also some positives too. So the first thing to note is that yes, if you have citrus fruit, it does seem to affect your acne. So if you have acne, congratulations. Rub some lemons and some oranges on your face, and maybe you'll be all right. Maybe. Do not take my advice as medical advice. But I mean, if you want to try something, hey, science.
Very important to go seek medical advice, especially if it turns out you're allergic.
Yeah, because yikes, super yikes. Oh my god. Allergies do exist, folks.
Allergies exist.
For me,
and they can, yeah.
I would say, for me, I'm allergic to bees and cabbage. And if you smother me with bees and cabbage, I will die. Do not smother me with bees and cabbage. I will haunt you.
You will be the one that his ghost haunts. But yes, make sure you double check your allergies. They can develop later in life.
They can. And also, before doing anything crazy, always talk to your doctor. Always seek medical advice before doing something like this. Because you never know what could also happen. Think about it.
Just because it works for other people does not always mean it will work for you.
Never said a truer thing.
Oh, but yeah, so, like, what are the types of plants that people have been, looking for? You mentioned oregano, you mentioned lemon, lavender, peppermint.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean, there's, lemongrass, cumin, cinnamon, peppermint, cilantro, and just a ridiculously long list. I mean, it's almost like if you can smell it and you like it, it's a scent. But,
to be honest, huh?
Oh, no, what is it?
To be honest, I think it'd be cool, kind of cool to have a book with just the plants and the supposed things they help with.
You mean
would
like
probably
the
want to buy one later.
10,000 other books that exist that just say
Yeah,
these
I
exact
know.
things?
It makes it really hard to pick one.
Tell you what, I will find a good one for you that I will look at and go, hey, this is, I think, as credible as it gets. Here you go.
Hey,
A personal suggestion for me.
okay, I can do with that.
Okay.
Although I can imagine there's quite a number of issues with some of those books too.
Yeah, I mean, just think of it like this, right? Like, there's a vast sum of pseudoscience out there that there's a bunch of people who are, I'm not going to say granola hippie fools, but people who mean well, who spread disinformation from a variety of sources that are touting things that just simply aren't true, aren't backed up by science, and are likely just trying to sell a book. But for the people who are not just trying to sell a book, who are trying to present things and tout facts, I would say do more research. Do more research.
Fair, fair, fair. I think my microphone just changed on me. Nope, it's fine. Alright. Yeah, but fair, there's still research being done about it, so might want to just, double check all that before you go into the purchasing, because some people trying to spread information that will help the world. Other people, money, 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 money.
And other people just want to see the world burn.
Also fair, because sometimes you just feel like one of those days,
Yeah, just one of those.
Especially with it being hot as heck, sometimes it does feel like the world's on fire.
My world was on fire a couple of days ago.
So, with so many different plants and scents that have different effects, what are the most common ones across them all? If there is one.
I mean, like common effects in general?
Yeah, common effects in general.
All right, well, some of the positive general effects that seem to be across the board is just that, if you're in the presence of certain, I'm just going to say lavender, because lavender has been pretty researched. It seems to promote good digestion. It allows for a more positive balance of your overall mood and other things. So if you tend to be moody, you might have an imbalance of certain hormones. This might help even you out, potentially. Psychiatrists and therapists have used various flora in their offices for a very long time with the intention of trying to bring in a natural environment to try and soothe and calm down a person during a particularly stressful, traumatic, or trying element of their life.
Mm-hmm. I like the picture that was just on.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty setup. I love it.
Yeah, I love that setup. Definitely big popular ones, obviously lavender, peppermint, and other things that kind of create an atmospheric kind of effect. So, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that shows a lot of positive effects relating to floral and, decreased depression, decreased anxiety, and some of the other fairly common, at least psychological effects and disorders that are experienced by Western individuals.
Okay. Helping with digestion, soothing an individual, hopefully a more positive hormone balance are kind of the minimum that these aromas help with, if I'm understanding it all correctly.
Yeah.
What about some of the more, I guess, larger things that they can help with? Like you mentioned with oregano or some other things helping with cancer?
Yeah. I think one of the big ones that supposedly has been helping with, and this is, I believe, cinnamon and lemon, has helped to combat it is believed that it is able to combat this particular problem, which is obesity. Obesity in America is a huge problem. It is an epidemic, and supposedly it aids in the digestion as well as fostering certain gut bacteriums that aid in the loss of fat. They also give you an atmosphere of having food constantly around you, which makes you less inclined to eat, supposedly, which are all things that kind of have issues with people who are going through this particular process. And there's also the fact that individuals who are obese typically store lots of water in their body. They retain a lot of it. Being exposed to anything that's citrus, whether it be ingested through the mouth or whether it's smelled, is going to probably release a series of hormones that will aid in the immediate evacuation of that water.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. There's a couple other things I could say about this though too.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like, let's say like you go to see a particular doctor, right?
Okay.
And you perhaps you get like you have to get like some sort of bad thing, and you have to eat some sort of like bad pill. We'll say
Bad pill?
We'll say a bad pill. I call it a bad pill. Let's say you go to the dentist because you have some sort of an infection. You can get like antibiotics, and they kill all your gut bacteria for the most part when you take antibiotics. And a lot of people will say, hey, yogurt will assist you in creating a new gut bacteria or help rebuild your immune system in that particular way. Aromatherapy has shown that it also can be used to do the exact same thing. So that's some other interesting positives that are associated with it. But of course, there's a lot of research that still needs to be done. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Could always use more research, especially if it's still in the pseudoscience stage. Well, it's good to hear that it can actually help with some larger issues that people have, especially with the next question that I kind of want answered.
Okay.
So, if people are believing that it is helpful, so what are some reasons that people might choose aromatherapy over standard medication, or even vice versa? Is it like circumstantial? Is it just based on preference? Like, what are some of the reasons that people might, choose one over the other?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different particular things that you could consider, but I think the biggest one is that often medical treatments that are extremely invasive or harsh are not something that a person can do. If a person isn't able to take a powerful medication, and they can't digest it. So let's say they're missing a portion of their stomach. There's a person I know who has this particular problem. Aromatherapy offers them an alternative solution in comparison to taking the conventional medicine that they wouldn't normally be able to do. Also, some people have allergies to certain medications like penicillin. And if you are trying to find a way, an alternative, to it, sometimes aromatherapy can be useful that way. Now, I personally wouldn't do it ever. I would find the other alternative, which is more scientific. But I mean, it is something that has been done before. And also, as I mentioned before, the French surgeon in World War II was using it as an anesthetic. So. Would you do that, or would you take some sort of other thing? I would take the other thing, but some people might take the other less invasive option.
That's on their preference for how they want to get treated. Like, I have a friend of mine who will absolutely, at all costs, try to avoid standard conventional medication.
I mean, I think it's also important to note, though, that once again, that there are issues when it comes to this stuff. Sometimes the placebo effect is equal on par with the information that's put forth. So. It might very well be the placebo effect going on.
Who knows? Does make sense though that has a less efficacy than the more potent, medical drug to match it. Mainly because the medical drug is supposed to have the research done to be as potentially effective as possible.
Yeah.
Potentially, because sometimes things go wrong.
Things go very wrong, shockingly wrong.
The human body. No. Ha! The human body can be extremely effed up.
Yes, it can. Or it can be wonderful. I mean, there's that one John Mayer song, I think it's John Mayer, that's like, your body's a wonderland.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that sometimes, especially when I bite my cheek from eating.
Oh, God. That's called too excited. You need to calm down.
It's called my mouth needs to chill! Alright. So, let me double check to make sure I am not neglecting anyone in the chat room. I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Granted, today is Wednesday, so it'd be a bit busy for people.
Yeah, things happen.
Things happen. It's
I'm
called
sure
life.
I'm sure you ninja watchers out there, or people who will watch this in the future, will be like, "Oh my God, how dare you speak to us this way?" And I'm like, you know what you need to do? Subscribe.
Subscribe.
All right.
Shameless plug. All right. So, you mentioned, aromatherapy, the placebo effect,
Mhm.
essential oils, which are more artificial in nature.
Yes.
Unless you're talking about Aristotle, at which point you're like boiling something down from
No,
its
no, no.
natural.
It's still technically.
Technically,
It's still technically like it's no
man-made, because you're
longer.
definitely not finding it. And
Yeah, you're not just gonna go like, oh, look at this, this boiling pit of it smells like lavender. It must be a boiling pit of lavender. Yeah, you don't come across that.
it's a boiling pit of vanilla.
Or vanilla. Yeah, there you go. Although I'd be tempted to dip a finger in. I'd be honest.
Human temptation. It's a dangerous thing.
It is.
Okay, so you mentioned, aromatherapy, less efficacy than the more potent medical drug. So when it comes to aromatherapy itself, as the treatment, what would you say is better? The natural flora, like the real ones, the ones you can find in nature, in the forests, on the land, versus essential oils, which are man-made and more synthetic?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know really which one I would prefer, but I would say that essential oils are far more problematic as their direct effects are less potent. Which is strange when you consider the fact that like one is just natural and the other one is a hyper intense version of the natural thing. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the natural plants and whatnot are more effective in overall treatment if you're measuring for the people who are against the placebo effect. This seems to be the case. Essential oils, don't seem to work as well. It's not that they don't work; it's just they don't seem to work as well, according to a variety of scientists. But I would also say this: essential oils are extremely dangerous. They are extremely hazardous to the body. I mean, I believe it's 4 milliliters is enough to kill you if you consume it.
Pardon?
That is, 4 milliliters is enough to kill you if you consume it. It's very small amount. That is not a lot. You could literally displace that in a water and be like, oh shit, oh fuck, here we go. Yeah, it's bad. If you apply that kind of stuff to your skin, it can actually burn and peel it away. So it's like, you gotta be careful with this stuff. This is not something to just play with necessarily.
Jeez.
Yeah.
4 milliliters is less than a teaspoon.
Yeah. It is enough to actually kill some people. So, yeah, it's very small. Yeah.
Caramba.
Yeah. So I would say like when it comes down to it, I mean, I personally would prefer the natural for the variety of reasons that I stated. But I mean, hey, some people are risk takers. Some people like to live life dangerously.
Yeah, definitely. Good to know there's a difference. One of them is obviously more dangerous than the other one. Goodness gracious. Probably is not going to stop me from buying scented candles, though. Those things smell nice.
Yeah, I mean, I like a good scented candle. I just don't think it works the same way that Flora does when it comes to the effects of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I do not have a green thumb. I would buy a flower with the attempt of keeping it alive. Yeah, nah.
This is why I get cacti.
Cacti. I'm pretty sure I would be. I'm pretty sure I'm so bad I would kill a cacti.
Oh my god.
I am that terrible. Okay, this is why my parents are the ones to take care of the plants, not me.
It's fine. I have a green thumb. It's okay. I will allow you to borrow my green thumb at times.
So, other than potentially being lethal,
Okay.
what are some other negative side effects from using essential oils versus the real plants? Besides killing you, apparently, if you ingest it.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned before about the tactile uses, that actually seems to play a huge part in some of its negative stuff. Obviously, burning your skin, not a positive, not a good thing. Especially the fact that there's poisonous, not a good thing either. The body hasn't had time to adapt, so it's like there's a lot of problems. So, yeah, I would say that like in essence, the negative side effects have to do with the concentration, application, and accidentals, as well as the fact that technically speaking, the body doesn't really understand how to register it. So if it does create hormones, it's basing probably the hormones only halfway sequentially. So my kind of thought is that the natural plant is a way in which the body is able to understand and recognize. So it more accurately, I can say that word.
English.
English. I know we had a problem today. It's able to accurately utilize its processes to develop the hormones that necessarily respond to the various stimuli in the environment, and as a consequence, it builds a corresponding memory easily. And then from there, I'm assuming that the overall memory and the hormone create the overall effect in the body that creates the positive things that people touted. When you have a highly concentrated version of something, it's no longer natural, so the body has a harder time recognizing what it is and then understanding what to do with it. And,
It's a yikes.
and that's the reason why some candles don't smell like anything at all, even though they're supposed to be scented candles.
Granted, my sniffer's just broken.
Well, either that or it's just, overly, like it's too much, it's an overload.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, too much high concentration, and there's always the saying of too much of anything can pretty much kill you.
yeah, I mean, especially, it's, like essential oils. I mean, like a little eyedropper, probably has enough to do some serious damage. So.
Like, eyedropper, it's less than a teaspoon. That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah,
Yikes.
definitely terrifying.
Body can adapt to natural. Body has a hard time adapting to superficial. Synthetics. Ah! Oh, goodness. Hello, host! Thank you for the comment. Speaking of comments, it is time to check in on the comment section. Whoop whoop! Host. I accidentally made an art gallery uninhabitable with some essential oils. 12 drops of lavender can hotbox a small gallery.
Yes, it can.
Oh,
Yes, it
yeah. Now I'm interested as to what gallery, but you know what? That's an ad. That's okay.
Actually,
no
no,
need
host.
to answer
Host. I want to know what gallery you just
that.
tell me which gallery you destroyed.
Oh my
I
goodness.
want to know.
But they also say most essential oils don't come with diluting oils, which is a problem with concentration.
Yes, I 100%
Yeah.
agree with you. And this is the reason why when you buy things on the internet, buyer needs to be wary.
The buyer needs to be wary and do their research about what they're buying.
Yes,
Read the fine print. It's where they get you.
indeed. All right, host. Well, I guess I'll just wait for your email then.
There is that small latency delay between what we can see in the chat versus what they type. So,
This is true.
yeah.
Okay.
Moving on. Bum ba dum ba da da da. Da.
Conclusions.
Time for the conclusion. Woot woot. So, curious. As aromatherapy is right now, how effective do you personally believe it? So, like, you personally, how effective do you think it is as a treatment option?
All right.
That's me a lot.
Here's what I'm going to say about this. All right. I think that aromatherapy very likely does, in fact, work to some extent. Do I believe that it's enough to treat cancer? I think probably not. But hey, you know what? If the research turns out to be the way it is, then awesome. But I want to see all of the data before all that gets set up, because that's a pretty big thing.
It's a pretty big thing, especially if it's only an assist rather than, a cause.
Exactly. Overall, I would say no. When it comes to like uniformal treatment, but I think that it does have a strong enough effect on people who are experiencing what I would say is more minor problems. And I think that if you don't have severe depression but you have mild depression, I think there's definitely some evidence to suggest that incense likes things, or certain other aromas and things like that could potentially affect your mood, in which case that might be a positive. So I think in a lighter way, yes. In a bigger scale, no.
Okay, fair. Not only does it usually smell nice, but if you get the flora, they usually look pretty.
Indeed.
And sometimes the aesthetics help quite a bit.
Yes, very much so.
But yeah, what other things could you compare aromatherapy with, besides... would you consider it more of a home remedy type of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely more of a home remedy kind of thing. I don't think it's necessarily like a treatment for everything. But I give an example. If you have a cold, all right, and you have lemon tea with honey to soothe your throat. I think that that's kind of the same camp as aromatherapy. It's like it can treat the little stuff, but if it comes to bigger things, I think probably not. Especially things that are incredibly invasive, like a big time surgery. Like I'm not going. You know what? Just put some lavender in the corner. I'm gonna be okay. Go ahead and cut it up. Like no. You're giving me drugs. You're putting me out. You're making me. I don't feel a damn thing, and I wake up never knowing anything happened. All right. It's That's...
Fair. Especially for more painful treatments, such as
Yeah.
surgery.
Yeah.
Granted, I can see why people use the home remedies and stuff. My family uses quite a bit of it, especially with how expensive medicines can be.
Oh yeah, medicines can be quite expensive.
Alright. So, really quickly, similar to how we covered hypnotherapy a week ago. Oh hey, exactly a week ago. How do you think aromatherapy could be improved?
I think the markets need to stop promoting it as a solve everything. I think they're like, hey, look at this. This does this. This does this. This does this. I'm like, no. Just be like, lavender, yes, it helps soothe people, helps calm people down. Okay. Outside of that, I would say, like, just be very specific about what it actually does. Don't be touting outrageous claims. Understand that all things are not good for you. Understand the positive effects that are associated with it, as well as negative associations with it. And definitely stick to the medically proven things, and don't go too crazy. Don't follow some outrageous claim and then just get hurt and be like, oh shit, oops. And then make sure to do more research, because more research never hurt anybody.
If you don't know something 100%, learn even more. You might even uncover some more secrets that need to be explored.
Indeed.
The more information you have, the better. As long as it's credible. But we do have... Well, that was my last question. We did get some info about the gallery. It was a small thing for UCSD art class at the end of the quarter.
Okay.
And it was a gallery for various artists.
That's funny.
Talk about whoopsie. Alright, so we are coming up on 10 o'clock. Thank you for those who are watching now and in the future. Remember, we've got our Question of the Day series on Twitter and TikTok, so feel free to answer the question of the day on those platforms, or even on our YouTubes here. They will be coming out every day. We've got our Twitch live stream on Saturdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for game night. Still deciding the game, but if there's a preference for a game, we'd be happy to oblige as long as we have it. Can't play a game you don't have, And send in your questions for the Q&A episode in around 2 weeks, and I'm looking forward to Saturday's episode. The question bonanza. Kind of different from the Q&A.
Oh.
Really different from the Q&A.
Yeah, question bonanza. It's gonna be a fun one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to check everything out. I say, hey, have a good evening or a good day, depending on whenever you hear this, future people out there, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.